Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In today's ongoing coverage of the civil war that is taking place inside of the former state of Ethiopia, we're going to look at the ongoing offensive by the Ethiopian military in its efforts to make inroads into the Amhara region from its many losses that it has suffered over the many months of conflict. So, where we're going to start first is reports of fighting that is occurring east of Waldea, and I'm going to kind of zoom into the area where we're specifically looking at, and this is the town of Shifra. And it would appear that a operation did occur in terms of the Ethiopian forces attempting to move in the vicinity of Shifra, possibly at some point crossing into the Tigray region. Now, with that being said, that force was reportedly met with blistering resistance and suffered many casualties. And in fact, we're also hearing reports now that the town could be shelled or is being shelled, and forces of the Tigrayan Defense Forces could be, in fact, moving in to seize control of this small border town that lies on the border of the Afar region and the Tigray region. So, would taking this town, would it benefit the Tigray region? Would it benefit the Tigrayan Defense Forces? And I would have to say, from the information that I have looking at the town, I would say no. Can the Tigrayan Defense Forces seize control of this town? Probably. And it may, in fact, actually take control of it at some point in an effort to prevent further operations from proceeding into the Tigray region from the vicinity of Shifra. But if you look at this town and you look at the environment around the town, and I'm going to try to go into a different view here where everybody can kind of see what we're looking at. So again, not a huge town. Obviously, there's a road junction here, a tri-junction. One road leads south, another road leads east and then west into the actual Tigray region itself. And then you can see the border here between the Tigray region and then Shifra, the actual town itself. And you can see that obviously it's not difficult for the TDF to shell this town or even attack it if it needed to. Now, what you can also see is it's very flat. The area around the town, there's not a lot of major terrain features. There's no hills. It's just flat, and that would benefit the Ethiopian military in terms of the possible use of drones or even aircraft dropping dumb bombs. You would be able to see troops traveling along roadways in the open, convoys moving, and the Ethiopian Air Force would obviously be able to attack those forces. Now, if you look just not far from Shifra, and this is probably where some of the artillery is coming, just 3 miles away, you do have major terrain features. And this is where it starts to become very rugged, very hilly, and it is the type of terrain in which the Tigrayan Defense Forces have seen a great deal of success in engaging the forces of the Ethiopian military and the forces of the Amhara and Afar paramilitary forces. But again, as soon as you leave that area and as you start to get closer to Shifra, and again, this is the main road leading into Shifra from the Tigray region. As I move toward Shifra, you can see it is very flat, and there's not any form of foliage for cover. So if the Ethiopian military is operating drones over this area, those forces of the Tigrayan Defense Forces would be very susceptible to attack, even in urban areas. Again, very small town. As you can see, very little urban planning went into the construction of this town, and it would just the makeup of the structures are probably something that could not be fortified for an extended period of time. So then the question is if you remove the idea that the town is there and it really only provides limited concealment, not cover per se, what strategic purpose would it be in holding this town from the Ethiopian army? And I would say that the cost would probably be more than the actual gain. I mean, obviously, you could the gain would be that the town could be seized, and from a morale standpoint, a political standpoint, it is another town that was taken by the Tigrayan Defense Forces. But holding it long term, it would appear to be just not a worthy cause in terms of the possible costs that the Tigrayan Defense Forces would have to take in order to hold it. And I believe that at least operating closer to these mountainous areas in terms of the light infantry tactics that we've been seeing from the TDF would probably serve them better than to actually continue to seize control of Shifra and possibly continue to move east. Now, obviously, we've heard reports that some of the drones may be operating in these areas or based in these areas further to the east, but again, that would you would need significant assets and resources to invade and hold the Afar region, and again, I think the cost would be much more than the actual gain. In terms of the fighting that is going on in the vicinity of Dese, north of Dese, it would appear that all information that is coming out of what I would define as the North Dese front, just south of Mursa, is that the operation continues to not go well for the Ethiopian military. It is seeing very little movement north. It is not able to maneuver on a wide frontal zone in the vicinity of Dese North. Obviously, there is some movements that are happening, but a great movement of multiple brigades heading north. It's just something that is not occurring. The operation it appears to be not working well. The only real issue right now is the reports of the use of air power. But any ground movement north of Dese along the A2 highway and in areas obviously west and east along this frontal zone are not going well. They appear to be, they meaning the Ethiopian army, the Amhara paramilitary forces, really appear to be stalled at this point. And again, we continue to hear of limited counterattacks being conducted by the Tigrayan Defense Forces. So at this point, it would almost appear in some cases that in some areas along this front, the TDF is seizing more land, more territory than the Ethiopian army is in this ongoing offensive. But we'll continue to watch this area and report. We're about day 6, day 2, depending on who you're asking and who's doing the reporting. But basically, it would appear that the operation probably kicked off about a week ago and continues. But again, we continue to hear and see political infighting within the higher echelons of the Ethiopian high command, the general staff, and then obviously you have the Amhara militias who also have their own commands as well. And that unity of command just is not present. And I've talked about that in several videos. If we move further out west around Gashina, it would appear that this is probably the area where this offensive has seen the most success in terms of the Ethiopian military. They proceed it down the B-22 highway, and again, we're hearing they're operating right now in the vicinity of Arbit, and the fighting is taking place in the vicinity of Arbit and Gashina. But again, Gashina is very much under the control of the Tigrayan Defense Forces. And again, this is a very interesting approach from a military standpoint, very flat mesa type terrain with very rugged terrain to the north and to the southwest as well. And it's a struggle right now for in this area too as well for the Ethiopian army to progress along the B-22 highway. Again, they're facing intense resistance, a lot of defensive, uh, just tons of Tigrayan defense forces have set up defensive perimeters around Gashina. They set up the same thing. We really kind of started hearing about the defensive operations in terms of the TDF in Kobo, and then it's kind of spread from there. And I would imagine that was because the offensive was telegraphed. The Tigrayan Defense Forces were aware that there was going to be a large-scale offensive in the vicinity, running from Dese further west towards Gashina, and they were simply able to prepare for that operation. And it's military tactics 101. Attack your enemy where he's not suspecting you to attack. And unfortunately, the resources, the Ethiopian military does have more resources than the Tigray region. Unfortunately, most of those resources are still leg infantry, massive amounts of foot soldiers, and with some tanks, some armored personnel carriers, and very, very limited, if any, air support. And unfortunately, because of the terrain that we're looking at, a very small force can stop a much, much larger force, especially if that smaller force, is better trained and better motivated to stay in place and hold the ground against a force that may have had a month of training and not entirely wanting to be there. And unfortunately for the Ethiopian military, that's the case in a lot of these scenarios that we're seeing. Yes, they have a larger force. Yes, they are better supplied. Yes, they are able to provide a limited tank support, armored personnel carrier support. They are able to provide artillery. However, how inaccurate that may or may not be. But beyond that, it's still leg infantry moving forward, having to seize terrain features under very difficult conditions. And that's what the Ethiopian military is running into, and you can clearly see when you zoom into this Google map just how difficult it is. You go from very flat areas suddenly to very, very mountainous, rugged terrain in which many of these Ethiopian forces are traveling along these highways, such as the A2. Again, very flat, and then all of a sudden they're running into terrain features on both sides, to the front, to the east, to the west. The TDF has the ability to put heavy guns in those areas and can call in calls for fire along the A2 highway against these forces that are moving north. And that's really the challenge right now that the Ethiopian military is suffering from. But again, we'll continue to monitor the situation in case something changes. But right now, the whole situation on the ground in terms of the ENDF, or the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, and the Amhara militias is really just a stalled scenario. They're not progressing well, and it looks like this offensive, and I'm just going to kind of call it now, may have failed. Have a good day, everybody.